Well, do you remember your first job? I worked as a dishwasher in the back of Butler's Fish and Chips at Regina Beach. I was just 15 at the time, and you weren't allowed to serve the public until you were 16 years old. Well, recently, the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce made headlines when it proposed the province lower the minimum working age from 14 years old to 13. There hasn't been a whole lot of information about why this change was proposed. The Chamber has not been available to do interviews for the past week, and they were not available for our show today. But that hasn't stopped it from becoming something people in this province are talking about. So today we'll hear from a business owner and a teen worker. We'll hear about a study looking into the long-term job prospects of people who start work at a young age. And what they found may surprise you. We also want to hear from you. How old were you when you had your first job? What did you learn from that experience? Do you think the legal working age in this province should be lowered to 13? You can call 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. Well, our guests today are Sean Tucker and Laurie Job. Sean is Associate Professor, Faculty of Business Administration at the University of Regina. He's an expert on workplace safety. Sean Tucker, welcome to Blue Sky.
Good afternoon.
And Laurie Job is the President of the Saskatchewan Federation of Labour, also joining us today. Laurie, hello.
Hello there. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a great conversation to be able to have. Lots to think about here, lots to consider. So we did ask the Chamber of Commerce to come on the show today, but we were told it doesn't work for the schedule of the president. So we don't really have a clear idea of where this is coming from. But Sean, I know you've been following this closely. So what do we know about this proposal?
Yeah, I've also reached out to the chamber for conversation to learn more information, and it's really disappointing that they're not here to talk about their proposal. Last fall, we had an invitation for stakeholders to provide feedback on employment standards in Saskatchewan, and in that discussion document, we saw a request around the topic of youth employment. And so one suspects that that's kind of where the wheels started churning on this idea. And so we'll wait to see what comes from that consultation. I'm not seeing in Stats Canada data a labor force shortage for 15 to 24-year-olds. Last month, the unemployment rate was 12%. So, it's really an open question and that only the chamber can address.
Laurie, what's your sense of this? Where do you think this is coming from?
Yeah, we're not sure either. I think that the door was open last fall with the call for submissions to the review of the Labor Standards Act. And I think that I did hear that, it was, maybe to address the labor shortage, but we really don't believe that this is the answer. So, yeah, we're not sure. It's very troubling, and it's something that I hope that we can get to the bottom of.
Well, what we do know, the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce proposed this idea in their platform for the upcoming provincial election. And so that document is meant to provide political parties with information on the priorities of Saskatchewan businesses. And I will say that until this came up, I hadn't thought about teenagers and the rules around working. And my only frame of reference was my own job at 15. And I knew I wasn't allowed to serve the public when I was 15. So perhaps each of you can update us on what are the rules right now? Unless you're 14, you're probably not thinking about whether or not a 14-year-old can work, or maybe if you're an employer, you are. But Sean, just outline for us what the current rules are when it comes to teenagers working.
Sure. So very briefly, we have a graduated system for work, and we've got some exemptions. So if you're 18 years of age or older, you can work in really any role, provided you've got the training and credentials for that. At 16, you're not allowed to work in under 18, asbestos abatement, mining, these sorts of things. Under 16, no construction, some other restrictions there.
You couldn't work as a radiation worker. You couldn't work in logging. So it's quite, there's quite a range there of what jobs that you would expect there to be some safety concerns potentially.
Exactly. So in our quote minimum age in our legislation is 16, but in 2009 they settled on the absolute minimum age, which is 14, and so 14 and 15-year-olds are allowed to work in Saskatchewan. During the school year, there's restrictions on the hours of work. So no work before school starts, no work after 10 p.m., and maximum of 16 hours per week during the school year. But that's going to change with the end of school. And the exemptions are pretty broad. So family businesses, it's okay for kids under 14 to work in those. Traditional farm operations, babysitting, camp counselor, these types of jobs are still okay. A young entrepreneur, that's still okay if it's your own business. So that's sort of a thumbnail sketch of it.
And Lori, how do we compare to other provinces at this point with everything that Sean just outlined? Would that be in line with other jurisdictions?
I think mostly, I do think that there are a few provinces, a couple anyways, that have 13 as an age, that they can start with supervision and parents' permission and that kind of thing. But again, I'm not sure why why this discussion started, what prompted it. So.
Yeah, and we're going to get into just some different perspectives on it today on the show. And if people want to share their thoughts and maybe they want to share what first job they did, you can give us a call today, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. Today on Blue Sky, we are talking about what age teenagers should start working. The Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce proposed this idea for the province to consider lowering the youth employment age to 13. And our guests today are Sean Tucker, Associate Professor, Faculty of Business Administration at the University of Regina, and also Lori Jobe, who's the President of the Saskatchewan Federation of Labour. Each were outlining sort of what the current rules are, and Keith emails, like most farm kids, I was working at a very young age, about 10, cleaning grain bins, driving tractors, feeding livestock, picking rocks, etc. The best was skipping school during harvest. You can email us to bluesky@cbc.ca, or like I said, our number to call, 1-800-716-2221. Now, Sean Tucker, after outlining sort of the current situation with all of that in mind, that if you are 14 or 15 years old, you would need permission from a parent or guardian to work. There are exemptions. You can't work if you're under the age of 18 and in industries like construction, mining, forestry, etc. So with all of that in mind, Sean, what services or industries are left that could employ 13-year-olds?
It's 13-year-olds. Well, right now, it's if you've got a family business, you can do that legally. The one piece that I forgot to mention was that if you're 14 or 15, in addition to the parental permission, you do need to take the Young Worker Readiness to Work certificate course online, which is a short online course. But that in no way, to be clear to supervisors and employers who are listening to this, replaces job-related training. It's just a high-level overview of rights and responsibilities in the workplace.
Lori, what are your thoughts on 13-year-olds, even if they were to take the Young Worker Readiness Certificate course, even if they had parental permission? What are your thoughts on that? Is it safe for 13-year-olds to work?
Well, first off, I'd echo Sean's remarks about the Young Worker Readiness Certificate does not really provide training or like especially on the job specific to the workplace. Those are really important factors that need to be, that we need to be highlighting, as well as proper supervision. But I think for 13-year-olds, like when I think of all the young people that I know, and many of them are like 12, 13, 14, every young person matures differently. Some 13-year-olds might be totally prepared for the workplace, while there's some 15-year-olds that wouldn't be anywhere near ready to be, put in some of these situations. So I think that 13 is just a little too young to be testing this. And I think, there's so many things that come to mind when I think about young people entering the workplace. When I started work, and I mean, I'll give you, that was quite a long time ago, it was just the thing to do. Almost everybody I knew, by the time we turned 15 or 16 and we were going out and getting some sort of part-time job. These days, the pressures that are on young people is completely different. And there's just so many things that young people are dealing with. I think we're asking a whole lot for 13-year-olds to be even considering working outside the home, unless, of course, they're raised in the family business or the family farm and those kinds of things that they grew up with. That's a whole different conversation than young people just going out and applying for a job down at the corner coffee shop or the fast food restaurant, those kinds of things. So, I mean, it's just, the conversation to me is just completely not necessary. I think they're trying to fix a problem that isn't there, and we need to really step back and take a real close look at this, because it's too dangerous. Too many young people are getting hurt as it is, and we need to make sure that we're doing all we can in terms of making laws that protect young people.
The Chamber did release a statement saying it has been an unequivocal advocate for workplace safety and workplace standards. And it goes on to say, quote, ultimately, the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce believes the decision for a youth to enter the workforce resides with the youth and their family or guardian. We do have a caller on the line, so let's go to Jack in Lumsden. Hello, Jack. Welcome to Blue Sky.
Hello. Just want to check with your resource people. Interesting conversation. I was a paper boy when I was very young, 12, 13 years old. Then I graduated into pumping gas when I was about 15 for a couple of years as well. I'm real curious about where the lobby is coming from for this one. I'm very curious that the Chamber of Commerce hasn't stepped up to say, this is what we're thinking about, this is the issue in terms of skills and supply for the labor force. I also have a strong hunch that this is tied to the fact in Saskatchewan we're the second lowest in minimum wage offerings to the public to go to work, and that they can't find people for the service industry. That's my strong hunch. I'd just like a reaction to this.
Fair point, Jack. Thanks for calling. We'll put that to our two guests today, and then we are going to hear from a business owner in just a moment. But Sean, do you want to weigh in there? The fact that we've got the lowest minimum wage, do you think that it's difficult to find people to get into those jobs? What do you think on what Jack just said?
Well, I think on the minimum wage, I'll defer to Lori on that. I just want to say that, we think about 13-year-olds entering, kind of more formal workplaces, and that they're 13-year, 14, 15-year-olds at great risk of exploitation. And we just had the case of Will Kratenko, who worked at a co-op grocery store, was asked by his supervisor to use a gas-powered pressure washer to clean the meat department, and nearly died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And so for the Chamber to come out and say that, they have a great safety record, and come out and say this right after this case has come out in the province is just really, optics aren't good on it, and I'm not sure that's in alignment with those values. There's also the part of this is around education too. So we look at international labor rights. Education is really important, and too much work during the school year can really have long-term effects on educational outcomes, dropout rates, school absenteeism grades. There's lots of research to demonstrate this out of the US. And so, 13, I'd echo Lori's point. 13 is just too young, given the risks, given the potential adverse effects to their education.
Yeah, Lori, do you want to chime in here? And we did have another call, someone who wants to know if the Chamber wants younger workers because they wouldn't be guaranteed a minimum wage. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on how we pay people and how that might factor into this conversation.
Well, in terms of minimum wage, it's been mentioned, and we do have the lowest minimum wage in the country. And another thing that I think that people don't realize or maybe forget is that the workers that we have out there working minimum wage jobs are young people. Not majority of them are, like they're working to feed their families and raising their families on these minimum wages. So it's not, people aren't getting minimum wage just to have a little extra pocket change. This is not the purpose. And having the lowest minimum wage means that people are working more and more jobs. It's not the answer to a wage or a worker shortage. Is getting people younger to work. The answer to that would be to pay people better. To have young people working and not even considering paying the minimum wage is deplorable. And I don't think that's even something that should enter into this conversation.
I do want to bring
Using young people, is
Yeah.
not the answer.
I want to bring in the perspective of a business that does currently hire 14-year-olds and any young workers. So for that, our colleague Alexander Silberman went to L's Cafe in Regina. It's a pretty busy ice cream shop. He spoke with Amelia Watson. She's 18, has been working at the cafe for 2 years, and she got her first job when she was 14. CBC spoke to her about why she thinks teens should be working.
I think a few different reasons. I think one, it kind of gets you experience, and that was kind of something I wanted. Also for financial reasons, you're young. I think that's kind of the age you get a bit more independence, especially for things, saving up for a car or school too. Also meeting people. I found some of my best friends I've met through work, and I think you learn a lot through working, and I think it's just a great opportunity.
Some people say that for 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, around that age, should be doing other things, like enjoying being a kid, sports. What would you say to people about that?
I think I understand that worry. I played competitive sports all the way till grade 12. So I think as long as you can find that balance, you don't want to work too much, obviously, especially when you're in high school. You should be focusing on school extracurriculars. But I think it's also just a great opportunity, and starting young, you develop great skills. And I found some of the skills that I learned through work helped me in school and doing extracurriculars. So I just think it's a great opportunity. Yeah.
And what do you think of the idea of allowing 13-year-olds to work? What do you think of the idea of a 13-year-old possibly working with you here?
I think it's a great idea, honestly, not just for the experience, but also for financial reasons, learning to save up money, understanding money, being able to control your own money, learning to save. I think it's all just about opportunities.
So that's Amelia Watson. Lori, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that working can be a real learning opportunity for young people. What do you think, Lori?
I absolutely agree with her. I don't disagree on any of those points. I think it's a great opportunity for young folks to get into the workplace and to learn new skills and all the things, financial responsibilities. But I do, draw the line at 13. I think that, when you're 14, it's a good enough you have opportunities then. When you're 13, you know what? Let's let kids be kids. Let's let them do the things that, if they have younger siblings, they're already got lots of responsibilities at home, I expect. And they don't need to be adding to that.
Some people might be, though. Young kids could be helping the family pay the bills. It's one thing to talk about it as, getting some extra spending money to buy ice cream in the summer. And a lot of kids would be contributing to the family income overall.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That just points to a bigger problem we have with our society. If we're expecting 13-year-olds to go and enter the workforce so they can help buy groceries for their family, that's a different conversation. So I it's even more concerning if that's the case.
Sean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Emil's comments are great. That's a great list of why young people work, and those are all good reasons that I think each of us experienced on this program today, and many listeners and that. But 13 is really young. I've got a 13-year-old. I've got our daughter's turning 16 soon, and there's a big difference, in that 3-4 years there. And what's on my mind is if we're looking at gaining responsibility, fiscal literacy, time management skills, learning responsibilities, if 13-year-olds are really keen for that, can we find other ways that they can gain those skills in babysitting or camp counselor job, other jobs, that other volunteer opportunities, I should say, that can develop those skills. It's just too young. We've seen in the U.S. where some Republican states have lowered the child labor age to 12 and younger in that. You can get life-altering injuries. It's wide open to exploitation. There's such a huge power differential between a 13-year-old and a 30-year-old supervisor or employer.
And what was the thinking? Why did they lower the age to 12? What's the argument being made by Republicans in some states?
Yeah, well, it's a combination, and it's hard to parse it apart. But you've got labor market conditions. What Lori's been talking as well about low wages. And then you get this other thing that's come into Saskatchewan politics now, is this parental rights as well. And so, parents decide on behalf of their children. And we saw this historically with child labor, back 100 years ago, is that a lot of parents thought it was a great thing because it would add to the family's income. But as Lori said, that's part of a different conversation about letting kids have an opportunity to go to school, stay in school, develop these skills, and when they're ready, they can go into the labor market.
Okay, I want to hear from a business owner now. So Elle Genda owns Elle's Cafe in Regina. Her cafe and ice cream shop is the one that Amelia works at. So they do hire folks who are younger than 16. Our colleague, the CBC's Alexander Silberman, asked her why she hires young people.
I feel like they keep it fresh. They know what other kids want. They know what younger people are looking for. And they just have that wonderful youth where they're happy to just kind of be in the workforce. And they always bring such great energy.
A lot of people might say it's difficult to hire a younger employee. They might need more supervision, more training. They're in school, of course, so you have to work around that schedule.
Yeah.
Why hire people who are like 15, 16,
well,
17?
I will say that it is a little bit more difficult because you are dealing with more part-time people, and they do have other priorities, of course, like school and their hobbies and sports. But I just feel that I started my first job when I was 14 years old, and it taught me so much when I actually was 18, 19, getting into the workforce, getting into the real world. It really teaches you how to handle customers, how to deal with people, make relationships. So I think it's really important that we encourage our youth to get out and, start working, and yeah.
What's the youngest employee you've ever had? Would it be 14?
I would say 14 or 15. We've had lots of 15-year-olds. We've had a couple 14-year-olds, yeah.
And if you could hire a 13-year-old, would you be open to it?
I think I would be. As long as they were eager and ready to work and, wanted to be here, I would definitely give them the chance.
All right. Is there anything else you would add?
Just that I think it's really important that we encourage our youth to, step into it and learn kind of what it's like to have those responsibilities of a job, to, follow a schedule and to be on time and, just kind of deal with the public.
And what do you think of, in general, of the idea of allowing 13-year-olds to work? Do you think that's something that would be positive?
I'm torn on that because I feel like, yes, if they want to get the experience, if they're ready for it, I think that's great. And I feel like with kids too, they all mature at a different age. But I also think they still need to enjoy being a kid. And that's the best thing about a part-time job, where they can make a little bit of money, but still enjoy, being a kid.
That is Elle Genda, who owns Elle's Cafe in Regina. Lori, Elle there was echoing some of the things that have been said on the show. But what are your thoughts listening to a business owner like that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I agree with most of what you said there. It's great. They have an opportunity. Young people have an opportunity to enter the workforce and to, serve people and do things that they like to do. But nothing in there told me that we needed to change the age to 13. There's just hasn't been any real discussion or real points that convince me that we need to get younger people into the workforce.
Okay, well, I want to share with you something that a slightly different perspective. So back in 2018, the University of British Columbia School of Business put out a study showing that teenagers who work at summer or evening jobs gain a competitive advantage later in their career. Marjan Hushmand was one of the co-authors of a study titled Beneficial Child Labor, the Impact of Adolescent Work on Future Professional Outcomes. It did appear in the journal Research in the Sociology of Work and followed young people for 10 years from the age of 15 to 25. So our colleague, yet again, CBC's Alexander Silberman, spoke to Marjan about the study.
Okay, sure. So we were interested to see what are some of the consequences of adolescent employment. And so we had access to this longitudinal survey. It was called Youth in Transition Survey. And that's a survey that we got it through Stats Canada. and it's like a whole procedure to have access to such data. Is very well protected for the privacy of people who were involved in it. And this survey follows a cohort of 15-year-olds over a span of 10 years. And we wanted to see if these, like, what was, the consequence of these 15-year-olds, whether they worked or not, or how many hours they worked over, when they become young adults later in life. So that was the motivation behind this study.
So the study found that teens had a competitive advantage. What was the advantage?
What we found is that those teenagers who work, whether it's during summertime or whether it's during the school year, when every 2 years that they were being interviewed for this survey, they would report desirable employment outcomes. So, for instance, they are more likely to be employed, and they would be having jobs that were better paid. They had access to jobs that was perceived as a better fit for them. So it was a higher organization person fit. And also, they had access to better career networks. So overall, it seemed that they were on a trajectory of finding jobs that were better suited for them. And they were getting paid more for those, I guess.
That's very interesting.
It is very interesting.
Yeah, another thing I found interesting too is that the study showed that there are benefits up to as many as 33 hours per week, which sounds like a ton of hours.
It was surprising to us because we were expecting, we knew it's going to be a curvilinear relationship, meaning it's not like, the more an adolescent work or a teenager work and the higher intensity is going to be beneficial, unlimited. So we were expecting to see a peak. But the peak was higher than we expected, to be honest. And it was like around 30 hours. And so it's telling. It's telling that if it's done well, so we also are very cautious about not making very generalized statement about any type of adolescence employment. This is obviously within Canadian, borders, protected by the child labor laws and policies, making sure that teenagers have access to safe working environment. However, having said all that, it seems that those teenagers who work, they are developing skill set that's going to be beneficial for them later in life. And what is so interesting is those teenagers who work during school year, that they get the most benefit of everybody. So you could work during summertime or you could work during school year. And we differentiate the two. And yes, working during summertime also is beneficial, but the highest yield of benefit comes from working during school year, which might be counterintuitive for a lot of folks. And we don't have data to support exactly what is going on. We suspect it's that those teenagers who can manage to work and go to school, they are developing that time management skill set that we all need to work on for the rest of our lives, I guess.
It's Marjan Hushmand, who's currently at the College of Business at the University of Hawaii. She was speaking to my colleague Alexander Silberman about a study she co-authored looking at the long-term consequences of teens starting work at 15. I'll get our guest to comment on that in just a second, but I first want to go to a caller. James in Saskatoon joins us right now. Hello, James.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for this conversation. So, I believe certainly that there's a significant value to individuals who enter into the workforce at a much younger age. Now, historically granted, many of the people that I knew had some kind of farm background where the families were always very active in having children participate in the process, right? But I will even lock it into a group of my peer group, actually. I had a group of 14 close friends, and we all kind of had the race to be the first millionaire. And it was the ones actually that who didn't even complete high school that won that competition. But this isn't just, and it didn't only pertain to affluence or race or anything. I've got a couple of friends of mine within that group who were Indigenous, who ended up becoming very successful private business operators, and their entrepreneurial spirit was really fostered in this. We all started working when we were 13, 14 years old. We worked in construction. We worked in many different fields. But what it does is there's a fallacy sometimes that people think, well, you only have to work 8 hours and therefore everything. No. If you calculate over the collection of an individual's time, sometimes it's necessary that you put in those 12-hour days, that you put in those 16-hour days, so that eventually there is a reward at a later time. But the skills that you learn, that you empower people, we've coddled our children way too much. And what we need to do is actually allow them to be able to open up. I went and was a carny when I was 14 years old. I traveled from town to town and went to different locations. It's not that my parents were uncaring. They knew that they had given me the tools to be adaptive enough to learn about, and that allowed me to have so much success and confidence in years later that I actually think people who, it's kind of that the best intention is actually hurting our children more than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff, James.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And there's quite a bit to unpack there because what people earn these days. I mean, it's a completely different work environment today than it was a number of years ago, and quite difficult to get a job, a well-paying job, despite having a lot of education. So it's different. I'm wondering, Lori, what comes to mind for you? So there's a few things that we've tackled. We heard from the person who did the study that there were benefits working during the school year. We heard from, I think it was James in Saskatoon, talking about what it was like when he was young and the people who went on to be quite successful. So, Lori, what comes to mind for you after hearing those different points of view?
Well, to be blunt, the study is irrelevant because they studied 15-year-olds and our conversation is about 13-year-olds. And there's a vast difference between a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. It's not the same conversation as far as I can see. And I do think that there's lots of benefits for young people being in the workforce. I will never deny that, but I just don't think it has to start at 13. And changing the law for that to happen is it's a little frightening to me. I think I'll just pass it off to Sean. I know that he's got a couple of things he wants to jump in on.
Take it away, Sean.
Hey, Lisa. Yeah, I just want to comment on the injury and health and safety part of this. So when Elle was on earlier, she mentioned, handling customers, dealing with the public, and that's okay. But listen, there are many 14, 15, 16-year-old girls who are sexually harassed at work. And we've got to talk about that as well by their bosses, supervisors, or members of the public. I've got stats here from the Saskatchewan Workers' Compensation Board. And last year in 2023, there was over 2,600 injury claims for workers aged 14 to 25, and 200 of them were serious injuries that's over 50 days away from work. So, work it has all sorts of benefits, and nobody's denying them, but there are risks that come with it. And to go back to Lori's point, there's a lot of change, a lot of maturing that goes on between 13, 15, 16 years of age and that. And so back to our question, what is the right age? We settle on 14 as the absolute minimum with considerable restrictions. And that was settled on in 2009. And there are no compelling reasons for changing that at this point that have made.
Okay. Well, I appreciated being able to have this conversation today. You gave me lots to think about. So thanks for being our guest today. Sean, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
And Lori, thanks to you too.
Thank you very much.
Laurie Jobe is president of the Saskatchewan Federation of Labour. Sean Tucker is an associate professor in the Faculty of Business Administration at the University of Regina. If you have thoughts that you didn't get a chance to express today, you can always call our talkback 1-800-661-7540.